Yo, what is up, guys? Will here with Canyon from Fantasy Basketball Flock, and we've got a special video for you today. We are saving your season. Don't worry, you guys making the playoff pushes. You know, you're on the edge. You don't know if you're going to make it in. Maybe you're at the bottom of the league, but there's still a chance that you can make it, the push for the championship. We're here to save your season. We've got some moves, but before we get into the moves, if you guys could drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're not already, would appreciate the love and support. We're looking to help you guys out here, win some fantasy championships. And also, if you guys aren't on Underdog, link to join Underdog Fantasy down below in the description. If you use code Canyon, they're offering a 100% deposit match up to $100. We got the Super Bowl coming up, you know, NBA all through the rest of the season and the playoffs. They've got player props for a bunch of different sports, as well as best ball drafts we do throughout the season. Already looking forward to doing those with you guys. So if you want to draft with us, take the code in the description, sign up for Underdog using code Canyon. With all that aside, let's get right into the video. So right now the focus is for the middling teams, you know, maybe towards the bottom, you know, of the standings. We want to help you make the push, save your season, get to the playoffs, win the championship. But I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is relevant for all teams. So even if you're at the top, I think there's some good advice we're going to give you here. The first one here is if you're really struggling, you need to make the push, things aren't working out for you this season, you need to trade your studs for multiple good players. Now, I know that sounds kind of contradictory. I'm going to save my season. Why am I trading away my best player? He's the guy who's been performing for me. And while it's important, right, you want those studs, but that's kind of the reason you want to do it, because those guys are, you know, really desirable in terms of trades. And when you're able to kind of tier down from a first or second round player, you're able to get multiple good players to kind of surround your team with a little more consistency across the board. And probably the reason you are middling or towards the bottom of the standings is probably because you don't have a very good team around the studs. So for example, let's take a look, maybe a guy like Jokic, right? Top two, top three, you know, for a lot of people, he's still, you know, number one with the incredible season he's having. You know, obviously guys like Luka, but he's a top three guy for a lot of people. And you can tier down from him to a guy like Sabonis, who obviously I'd rather have Jokic than Sabonis rest of the season. But there's a lot of times where Sabonis has games where you look at it and you go, that kind of looks like a Jokic stat line, you know, in terms of, you know, production, fantasy, what he can give you across the board. And you can add on a guy like Drew Holiday. You can get some sort of top 50 player. I definitely would look to do that to get a little consistency. But I do want to call out when you're making those moves, I do kind of I don't really want to do a 2 or 3 for 1. I would like to still kind of make it technically a 2 for 2 or a 3 for 3 in terms of players that are included in the deal, because I do want not having to drop players and not have as much flexibility at the bottom of my roster. So I definitely would try to keep those moves 2 for 2, 3 for 3 if possible, because you want to be able to play the waiver wire and drop your worst player. But I think tiering down is really important. I know a lot of people might look at that trade and think, well, the package is way better. You know, the guy who has Sabonis and Drew Holiday, they're not going to make that move. But you're telling me in your fantasy leagues, if you got an inbox trade offer and you were going to get Jokic in a trade, you're telling me you wouldn't look at that and consider it. So even aim higher than that. Maybe ask for Sabonis and then another top 30 player and just kind of see if you can move the conversation from there. Because they're not just going to reject that offer. They're going to say, okay, how can I get Jokic? Let me, you know, work the deal. How can I get this first round guy you're offering me? So I definitely would try to do that. And alongside trading your studs, you want to trade your injured studs. Now, I know the value's low, right? You feel like you're selling low when you have a guy like KD or Halliburton, who was having an amazing season and got hurt for a little while. But even though when they're healthy, they might be top 10, top 15, top 20 players. Right now, they're not even in the top 500, right? They're not giving you any production to win right now. So even if you can recoup 80% of what their actual rest of season value is, that's something you should look to do. Because if you're going to hold on to these guys, it's not going to matter if you've lost the next 2-3 weeks, because you don't have the value that they have been giving you. So I know it's going to hurt, but I think you do want to trade those injured guys and move them off your roster to get some value recouped back. Obviously, aim for similar value to what they'll provide when they're healthy, but obviously you're going to have to settle for 90 or 80% of what their value actually is. And then another note here in terms of trades and moves, you need to get rid of the luxury stashes. So we've talked about this a couple times. Guys like Mark Williams, who we think if they were given a solidified role, and we want them to, they would be potentially top 80 guys out of nowhere off the waivers. But a lot of times you have to wait and you have to hold these guys and they give you duds just because they're not getting consistent minutes. So you really need to get rid of those guys. Obviously, you'd prefer it be a trade to recoup some value for the potential upside they offer. But holding them onto your roster and hoping for upside down the rest of the season isn't going to help you win now. And that's the focus of a lot of these moves. You need to make moves to win right now. If you're not making moves, trades, acquisitions, changes to your roster construction that's helping you win right now, you're not going to put yourself in a position to save your season and make it to the playoffs. You're kind of making the decision that you're giving up at this point.
Yeah, 100%. I was just going to say, this is the time of the season where you hit accept trade, where you hit send trade, where you hit drop player, right? There's no more time for hesitancy. We were in that sweet spot of there is still a little time to make a move and do something about the season, but we are closing down on playoffs here in about a month and a half. So the next point here, get rid of your dead weight. This is a category format point. So anybody on your team, if you're going for a field goal percentage, rebounds, blocks, turnover kind of build with your category format and you're going big heavy. If you have a guy like Fred VanVleet or Dinwiddie on your team too, that's kind of dead weight for your team, right? They might drop, really good games and provide a lot of threes, points, assists, some steals, and they might look like really good players and really good value. And you're like, I don't want to get rid of this guy. He's a stud. But it's kind of, moot, right? It's kind of dead weight, dead fantasy production because it's not helping you in those categories that you need to win. So you're still losing those categories that these guys might be kind of dogs in for you. So these top 50 fantasy players don't mean anything to you if they're not helping with the categories that you need to dominate to win your weeks. And the same thing, other league mates should be doing the same thing. So keep an eye out for those who do need those players, right? So if you have again, going back to that example, if you have a Fred VanVleet or a Spencer Dinwiddie and you're going big heavy and you see someone else who has maybe one or two centers and a guy like Nick Claxton or someone that is their version of their dead weight and they're going for points and assists, that's a great marriage, right? That's a good send trade opportunity. It's a good win-win. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You give them VanVleet who can actually be productive and add to their value on their team, and you can assume the guys like a Claxton or guys that are, good field goal percentage, not crazy points, but good rebounds, blocks, etc. So don't be afraid to shop those trades. And like Will was saying, just make some moves, right? It's a tough point of the season. But again, it's still early enough where, you don't have to freak out too much. So I wouldn't say if you're in those kind of leagues, if you're in a keeper league or a dynasty league, I wouldn't say, hey, mail it in and just trade for picks now, because there are 7 weeks left. So if you're a fringe team, there's still plenty of time. Just all you have to do is get in the playoffs. So I also wouldn't just ship your Shays, your Lucas, your Currys, whatever your parameters of your league is for those picks. I wouldn't mail that in quite yet because we're in that sweet spot of this is the time where you make moves and you can actually do something about it, but don't give up quite yet.
Definitely. And last up here, I want to talk about the waiver wire. And I think this is so important, honestly, for any team at any point in the standings, but definitely for the teams that are kind of middling and trying to make this push to make it to the playoffs and, fight for the championship. The waiver wire is so important. You want to be really aggressive and active. And one thing I want to talk about specifically with FAAB. So if you guys aren't familiar with FAAB, a lot of leagues use free agent acquisition budget, which is, a dollar amount you have to be able to acquire players. You kind of bid on them versus just making waiver claims. I know not everyone uses the same kind of waiver wire philosophy, but with FAAB specifically, if you're in a place where you are really trying to be active on the waiver wire and there's certain players that will give you a greater advantage to help win your week, spend more money than you would. The FAAB isn't going to carry over to next season in most leagues if you're just playing a normal kind of redraft NBA fantasy league. So you trying to save up and a lot of people try to make the perfect FAAB bid, right, on a player. Oh, there's a really good, Melo went down with an injury. I'm going to make a FAAB bid for Dennis Smith here. And you try to find the sweet spot of what you think other people will bid. Overbid. It's okay to lose bids or win bids by $10 or $15 more or 10 or 15% more than other league mates if you're getting a player who's going to get you a win. Because you're not just paying for the player, you're paying for a greater opportunity for you to win that week, and that's really important. I know a lot of people really, really try to hold tight onto their FAAB budget, but honestly, at this point, if you're at the middle point in the season and you maybe even need to win out, maybe you're at the bottom and you said the only way I make it is if I win out, then holding on to that FAAB isn't going to help you 3-4 weeks from now when you've lost the last 3 weeks. So make those claims, be really aggressive. And then being active. This is something we talk about in almost every video. We find a way to talk about this because it is literally, it's like a key to winning your fantasy leagues. Not just your weekly matchups, but your whole leagues, is being extra active on the waiver wire. We talk about it all the time. You need to be cutting your worst player to pick up players that help fill in the gaps for your games played, right? So a lot of times people will look into matchups and they look at the games for the week. Oh man, this guy's got 38 games. I only have 32. That stinks. Like, this is going to be a loss. Like, there's no way I can catch up to his guys playing more than mine. That's not true at all. You can match his games by dropping your worst player consistently, picking up other guys, making those claims throughout the week. And a lot of times we talk about dropping your worst player. It actually is probably pretty close. Your actual worst player on your roster who's not playing and the best waiver wire pickup, or whatever, the top 5 best waiver wire pickups, they're probably pretty close. A lot of times people tend to focus on the value of players, and they look at their player and they go, well, I like him more than Eric Gordon. We don't like Eric Gordon, but if you're looking at these two guys and one of them's playing, give me the game, give me the 20 whatever fantasy points I'm getting from this guy. That's going to help me win the week. And then you know what that does? Not only does it give me an extra game, it gives me the flexibility to then cut that player I added to do this whole thing again. That's how you win your weeks. It isn't just, oh, I got unlucky with injuries, I lost, or oh, this guy has more games than me, I lost. No, it's being active on the waiver wire to help fill in those gaps and win your weeks. Let us know in the comments any tips. I'm sure you guys have all been in leagues where you were the Cinderella story. You weren't supposed to make it, but you did, and you won the league. We want to hear about it. Help each other out in the comments. Ask us any questions as well in the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys. We'll see you in the next one.